Well, I saw this great little clip the other day with Kirk Cameron, and he was interviewing Professor John Lennox about faith, and he really, just in this short little clip, really articulates what I've been trying to articulate. I think John does a wonderful job of succinctly defining the issue. But Kirk Cameron, he falls into this classic trap that many, many people fall into today, not just Christians, just people in the world today, is their definition of faith is really screwed up. And I don't know where this came from, but it's a societal thing that now faith is the equivalent of nonsense. Like, if you have a bunch of faith in something, that means there's no evidence. It's just because you have faith. And that's what Kirk's comment was. He goes, man, I just wish, it's without faith, it's impossible to please God. So you just have to have this blind faith without evidence. And he's looking for more and more. And then just listen to what Professor John Lennox says. It's just classic. Watch this.
John, I love what you're saying, and it reminds me, as a young Christian, when I was wrestling with these issues, I wanted to have so much evidence. I wanted all the God-believing scientists to create such an airtight case that faith would not be required.
Hear what Kirk Cameron says there? That faith would no longer be required. See, he has a faulty definition of faith. Everybody, every single human being operates in the world of faith. Faith is what you understand to be true. Now, when he talked previously, just a few moments ago, about faith being a gift from God, again, use the definition. The gift from God is this, that you can understand what God has revealed to us in His Scripture, in the Bible, and that you can know it to be true. That's the gift, because if God wants to cover your eyes and keep you blind, that's exactly what's going to happen, okay? That's the gift that we have that ability to understand and know that that's true. That's the gift from God. Faith is what you understand to be true. Now listen to how John Lennox explains this.
And to live with Him forever. And yet the Scriptures say that faith it's impossible to please God without faith. Faith is a gift that comes to us from God, and somehow God has stacked the deck in such a way that faith cannot be removed from the equation. Why do you think that is?
Well, because it can't be removed from any equation. I can't prove to you, mathematically or scientifically, that my wife, to whom I've been married for 52 years, loves me. But I believe there's enough evidence of that for me to stake my life on it. We get a bit mystified here, and we don't realize that trust, faith is something that abides, it goes all the way through. And faith in God is not simply faith in a set of propositions, like in science. Faith in science is believing certain things, equations, and the rationality of the universe. But when we're talking about God, we're talking about faith and trust in a person. And of course, we would be very unwise these days, particularly, to trust people without there being evidence. We need evidence for trust. But evidence is the thing that leads to trust. It doesn't replace it. If I want to get a mortgage from a bank, I go into a bank manager and he says, on what basis should I trust you? Well, I've got this collateral, I've got this house. Well, that doesn't displace trust. It gives them a reason for trust. That's a very different matter. So we'll never do away with trust, even in ordinary human relationships. And what I spend a lot of time doing, because the new atheists have done a marvelous job in getting people to think that atheists have no faith. They have rationality and so on. And that's sheer nonsense. Richard Dawkins says in one of his books, atheists have no faith, and then he spends about 400 pages telling us what he believes.
Now, I just want to break in here just for a second. Understand this, that the word faith and belief are synonyms. They mean the same thing. One can be a noun and a verb, but they are in essence synonyms. So faith and belief is the same word. It's the same meaning. And that's why Professor Lennox was laughing when Dawkins says, we don't use any faith at all. And then he spends 400 pages explaining what he believes, which is all faith. It's belief and faith are synonyms. So here's Dr. Lennox again.
I mean, that's just is sheer nonsense. Christopher Hitchens was even worse. He once said, our beliefs are not a belief, our faith's not a faith. Because what they get confused with is the distinction between faith in a genuine self, that is trust in something based on evidence, and blind faith, which is trust where there's no evidence.
And that right there is the crux of the issue. You have to have mature people use evidence, testimony, logic, reason to base their beliefs and their understanding on. That's where their faith and belief comes from. When you're a child, we all believed in Santa Claus, but as we grew up, we did away with childish things. Why? Because the evidence disproved Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and all of this stuff. But there is no evidence to support evolution. Zero evidence to support man-made climate change. And yet, this type of blind faith in these nonsensical worldviews today, somehow they've done a really good job of making Christians, people that believe in the Bible and the actual evidence of historical and archaeological facts that have happened, and just the pure logic. I mean, the atheists believe, evolutionists believe that somehow life came from non-life, which has never been experienced any time in history. As much as the scientists try to find how they can create life out of non-life, it doesn't happen. And to take it one step further, to think that somehow our mind, our ability to use logic, reason, and wisdom, and our consciousness, somehow consciousness came from this random big bang of nonsense matter, that now we have this ability with this mind and conscience that came from that, is just pure fantasy. They're the ones that are delusional. And I love that. I've just discovered this John Lennox guy. He's been around for a long, long time. I was just introduced to him last week, and I'm so glad I was, because I just think this guy, he does a much better job right now of articulating these ideas than I do. So I just wanted to use him and the material that he's already created to help illustrate my point. And this is what I tried to unpack in my book, Belief. And John's has, half a dozen books, and his are big monsters. Mine's just little guys. I want to try to take people that are just struggling or wanting to learn and understand about these ideas, and I just wanted to simplify it, just get it right down to the basics. And so my books are short. They can be found on Amazon, $10, and boom, you're off to the races. But hear what else John Lennox has to say here.
The late Lord Sachs, who was the chief rabbi in the United Kingdom and Commonwealth, wrote a book once. He was a brilliant philosopher. And he said something roughly like this: science takes things apart to see how they work. Religion puts them together to see what they mean. And the point is that science can answer many questions, but it cannot answer the questions of meaning. We often put it this way, that science answers mainly the how questions and the why questions of function. Why is that bit there? But it cannot deal with the why questions of purpose.
I love that, because he does a perfect job of defining and illustrating the difference between science and religion, I guess is the best way to put it. It shows the shortcomings, what science is good at and what science is impossible at dealing with. Science can never deal with purpose and meaning. And a lot of that comes with, interaction on a personal relationship. When my son was growing up, I think he was a sophomore in high school, and had a campfire one night, and all his buddies were hanging out. And the next day, my son asked me, and you never know when you're going to have quality time with your children. Quality time typically comes as a result of quantity time. So if you want to have quality time, you need to spend quantity time with your children. And so we happened to be going to the store, and as we're getting out of the car to go into the store, he just stopped in, mid-activity. Hey, Dad, can I ask you a question? I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, yeah, son, what's up? He's like, hey, my buddies and I, we were at the campfire last night, and one of them asked a question, how you're always talking about the truth, the truth, the truth. I said, oh, yeah, son, you got it. He asked the question, he said, Dad, what's more important, belief or truth? I said, wow, that's a great question, son. And I told him the story. The story goes back to 1979 when there was a huge snowstorm at Michigan State University. I mean, it snowed for, I don't know, a week. And snow drifts and blizzards that shut down the university. Snow drifts were going up against the dorms, 3-4 stories tall against the dorms. And there were some students at Michigan State that believed they could jump off the dorm, land into the pillow of snow, and not get hurt. I mean, they passionately, profusely, they sincerely believed that. Well, lo and behold, they jumped off the dorm, landed into the pillow of snow, fell through the pillow of snow, hit the ground, and broke their bones. Now, son, let me ask you a question. What do you think was more important, their belief or the truth? He said, okay, Dad, I got it. And see, it's these types of questions, the interaction and questioning things that leads to wisdom and perspective that's required today. And so often than not, we're just bombarded with this nonsense about trusting the science, trust in the science of evolution, trust the science of man-made climate change, trust the evidence with the COVID nonsense, trust the evidence with trust the science with this vaccine, this jab that's killing people. All of this stuff is nonsense, and we have to question these things. Watch again how John Lennox explains this and delineating the difference between what science can do and what it can't do. I love this illustration about his Aunt Matilda.
I often illustrate this by telling a story about a fictitious Aunt Matilda who's baked a beautiful cake, and there it is in front of us. And she presents it to an assembly of all the Nobel Prize winners and asks them to analyze the cake. So you get a brilliant chemical analysis, you get an analysis in terms of biology and physics, in terms of quarks and electrons and everything else. And they give you a huge and perfect analysis. And when they've finished, she says, now, just before you go, please tell me why the cake was made. And she begins to grin. And the physicist, well, he can tell what it's made of, but he can't tell why she made the cake. And nor can the chemist, and nor can anybody else, not even the mathematicians who don't get Nobel Prizes. None of them can tell her why. Only she can if she reveals it to them. People think that faith is a religious word. It means believing where there's no evidence. That's nonsense. Faith is an ordinary word. It means trust, and it's as important in science as it is in any other field. Science can answer many questions, but it cannot answer the questions of meaning.
Okay, that was Professor John Lennox being interviewed by Kirk Cameron. I'll put the link down below to his full interview with John Lennox. It's about 12 or 15 minutes. I think it's well worth your time. And again, if you'd like a copy of my latest book, Belief, I'll put a link down below as well on where you can pick that up. This is RJ on the Move. It's Wednesday, July 26, 2023. Have a great day, everybody. Ciao.